Welcome students. This session is for BA second year English Literature paper first. In this session we'll be doing a poem by Robert Browning, Rabbin Ezra. Before we start with the poem, let's know about Robert Browning. Robert Browning was born on 7th May 1812 and he died on 12th December 1889, was an English poet and playwright whose dramatic monologues made him one of the foremost Victorian poets. So Robert Browning is a famous Victorian poet, and this form of poetry writing, that is dramatic monologues, which I've explained in my earlier session what dramatic monologue is. Robert Browning, he made this dramatic monologue writing style quite famous, and he is a well-known poet of Victorian age. His poems are noted for irony, characterization, dark humor, social commentary, historical settings, and challenging vocabulary and syntax. So he has experimented on so many things. You see the art of characterization in his poem, and there is a lot of change of vocabulary and syntax, the way he writes. His career began well but collapsed for a time. The long poems Pollen 1833 and Paracelsus 1835 were acclaimed, but in 1840 Sordello was seen as willfully obscure. So for a time being, his poems were not acclaimed that much. His career collapsed for a time. By the time his wife, and he married to poet Elizabeth Barrett, his wife died in 1861, he had published the collection of Men and Women 1855. So he has published this collection of poems. His Dramatis Personae 1864 and book-length epic poem The Ring and the Book, that was in 1868 to 1869, made him a leading British poet. So these works, they again gave him a lot of name, and he was then regarded as a leading British poet. He continued to write prolifically, but his reputation today rests largely on his middle period. He has written so many poems, he has written a lot of literature, but his reputation as a poet largely is in the middle period of his writing. On his death in 1889, he was seen as a sage and philosopher poet who had contributed to Victorian social and political discourse. Now, if we read his poems, after his death, he is usually seen as a philosopher poet. Even in this poem, though he has shown the philosophy of Jewish law and tradition, but somewhere we find that the images and you can say the thought process is repeated to that extent that we as readers, we feel that maybe this is Browning's own philosophy that is reflected in this poem. Let's see what this poem is about. Rabbin Ezra is a poem in dramatic monologue by Robert Browning, published in the collection Dramatis Personae in 1864. This poem is also a dramatic monologue, and we know that in dramatic monologue, one person is the speaker and someone is the listener in the background, but here we as readers are the listeners. And this poem, the speaker is Rabbin Ezra, or you can say that basically Browning had Rabbin Ezra in his mind, who is a 12th century scholar, and he somewhere in his expression is reflecting on his philosophy of Jewish law and tradition. So through the personage of Rabbin Ezra, or you can say Rabbin Ezra, that famous 12th century scholar, scholarly and learned Jew, the poem sets forth Browning's religious philosophy. So this not only reflects the Jewish philosophy of it's the philosophy of Jewish law and tradition, it also reflects Browning's own religious philosophy. The poem Final Metaphor describes life as a pot that is fashioned by the master's hand and argues that the value of a person should be measured not by the work done but by the character that has been molded. So the whole poem gives us this message that it is not what you do in your life, but rather whole lives should be taken as one whether it's youth age or old age, and what character basically a person develops in his whole lifetime, that is valuable. And here in the last metaphor, human life is described just like a pot, and master, that is God, is just like a potter who shapes our life. So our life gets meaning only what we do with our life as a whole, what character we take in with the help of God and with our own efforts. Let's continue with the text. He says, "Grow old along with me, the best is yet to be, the last of life for which the first was made. Our times are in his hand, who saith, a whole I plant, youth shows but half. Trust God, see all, not be afraid." So right from the beginning, he says that old age and youth age are not two different things in human life. Rather, Browning says that old age is a part of youth age, and you can say that when a person grows old, it's the best part of his life, because if you say old age is the last of life, youth age is the first of life. So youth age is made so that one achieves the last of his life. So there is a continuation of human existence where the first part of human life is molded for the second part of his life, that is old age. Our times are in his hand, and right from the beginning he says that God decides everything. It is God's hand that plans everything, who saith, a whole I plant, youth shows but half. So the whole life is planned by God, and if you try to interpret life just in your youth age, it is not appropriate, because youth is just the half of life that you have seen. Trust God, see all, not be afraid. He says one should not be afraid of getting old, because God has made the whole life as one, and youth is just half of the life. So one should not be afraid of getting old, because the later half of life is also planned and framed by God. Not that amassing flowers, youth sighed, which rose make ours, which lily leave, and then as best recall. Not that, admiring stars, it yearned, nor Jove nor Mars, might be some figured flame which blends, transcends them all. Now here, this writer, or Browning, or you can also say Rabbin Ezra, he's trying to say that one should not be satisfied just by the pleasures of life which one finds in youth age. And these pleasures of life are symbolized as amassing flowers, that is gathering flowers, and youth sighs, which rose make ours. Like in youth age, a person is so much involved into these physical pleasures of life that they start thinking what to enjoy and what to leave, which lily leave, and then as best recall what we do that we can say that we have best enjoyed our life. In youth age, one has high hopes, and the admiring stars, nor Jove nor Mars, they are again symbol of high hopes of human beings when they are in their youth age. And in the youth age, one feels that might be some figured flame, some bright star a person wishes to achieve, which blends and transcends them all. One wants to have the best of pleasures of life, wants to enjoy life in youth age, but he says that don't remain satisfied with just these things, with just pleasures of life. Life has more to offer. It's not just the enjoyments of youth and pleasures of youth describe what life is. Rather, the old age, or as one proceeds in life, you come to know the true meaning of human life. Nor for such hopes and fears, annulling youth brief years, do I remonstrate, folly wide the mark. Rather I prize the doubt, low kinds exist without, finished and finite clods, untroubled by a spark. Now here this Rabbi, he says that I don't speak against youth age, not for such hopes and fears, annulling youth brief years. He says I'm not speaking against youth age, and one should not waste youth brief years without getting any result in one's life. Do I remonstrate? He says I'm speaking against Youth age not because that it is full of enjoyment and it's full of pleasures, but he says that one should not waste youth age without getting any proper results out of it. He says, wide the mark. There are so many unattainable goals in one's life. Rather, I prize the doubt. He says, what I value is, I value doubt. And here doubt means to question. What is the value of one's life? This is the question that one needs to ask. Low kinds exist without doubt. So the people who don't have that curiosity, who are less intellectual, they exist without this doubt. That means these people, they just complete their life in merrymaking, in pleasures of life, and they do not have this way of questioning that what life is about, what is the value of life, what is the meaning of life. Finished and finite clods. He calls such people who do not have this doubt in their mind, or you can say the question in their mind, and who are not at all curious what the meaning of their life is. Such people are finished and finite clods. They have no mental expansion, untroubled by a spark, because they do not hear to their soul's voice. So here spark is somewhere can be said as voice of soul, and their soul doesn't speak to them, and they are not at all curious to know what they are and why they are and what is the meaning of their life. Let's analyze these stanzas. Rabbin Ezra was first published in 1864. It has 192 lines and is the clearest expression of Browning's optimistic philosophy of life. So we see Browning's optimism being reflected in this poem. Rabbin Ezra is a narrator here. You can say Rabbin Ezra or Rabbin Ezra. He was real 12th century Jewish scholar. So here, as I said, that Jewish philosophy is reflected in this poem by the narrator, Rabbin Ezra. What he says here is that in youth, man gathers experience. In age, he uses this experience to control his nature and behavior. So one's life should be examined as whole. Whatever one experiences in youth age, he continues with this experience and he uses this experience in his old age, and it gets reflected in his nature and behavior. Through man's struggle in youth, through his mistakes, he comes to spiritual understanding of God. So youth age is a formative time when man is struggling, and through his mistakes, he comes to know what exactly God's work is, and he gets that spiritual understanding as he advances in age, the universe and the man's place in this whole scheme of things. So as one advances in age, one comes to know a little about this mystery, what this universe is about, and what human existence is about, and what meaning is life, and what exactly a person is made for, or one gets born in this world, and what exactly one wants from one's life. So all this scheme of things one comes to know when one advances in life. What counts in reality is not what he has achieved, but what his intention is. So any human being should not be valued with his achievements in life, with all the goals that he has achieved in his life. Rather, one should always analyze a person from his intentions, what exactly he wanted and what he was focusing at. His aspirations count, and also how much effort he has put in to achieve his goals. So the aspirations, the feelings, desires, they do count, and how much effort he has put in to achieve his goal. He may not be successful in worldly sense, but if the effort, the striving is genuine, then that is all that matters. So success should not be counted in the worldly sense, in the leisures and the pleasures of life. Rather, the struggle, if the struggle is genuine, that struggle of life for higher purposes of life, that is all matters. It is the glorification of failure. So one can somewhere say that even if somewhere a person fails in those worldly senses, but if he has done something genuine spiritually and has found the meaning of his life, that is the true success. So success should not be measured in the worldly sense. Somewhere this Rabbin Ezra is trying to give this sort of a philosophy in this poem. We'll continue this poem in my next session.